Hello, everyone. My name is Johanna Álvarez, and I'm today here with Mike Sweeney. And as we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, we are finally publishing the last part of the video series that we wanted to share with you, answering some of the questions that came to our mind regarding privacy and how that topic is affecting the ad tech ecosystem, the way we know it today. Mike, how are you today?
Yeah, I'm doing well, thanks. What about yourself?
I'm doing fantastically well. I'm all ready to start answering our questions.
Cool, me too.
So, Mike, the first question that I'm going to ask is related to the video that you posted a couple of weeks ago related to the hearing in which the Big Four were giving answers related their shady activity on data and how they basically use a data as a source of revenue for their companies. And it was a very interesting hearing. So I'd like to ask you, what were your takeaways from that?
Yeah, so as you said, it was quite an interesting hearing. If maybe for those watching that aren't sure what we're talking about, I think it was on July 29th, 2020. The CEOs of Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon testified before a US subcommittee, and the topic was about antitrust law. And I would have to say there were quite a lot of really interesting moments and quite a lot of wow moments, I suppose, coming actually from the members of Congress, more so than the responses from the CEOs. I don't think that I don't think the answers from the CEOs were really that interesting. There were obviously for a couple of interesting comments that they made, but I think definitely the most insightful parts of that hearing came from the questions asked by the members of Congress. Of course, there were questions related to many different topics, like data privacy or anti-competitive activity by these companies. But there are also a few questions about China and other politically related questions. Particularly with the data privacy and the anti-competitiveness of some of these companies, particularly in the digital advertising and marketing industry, there were quite a few interesting things. I think for a lot of people that have worked in digital advertising and marketing for a long time, a lot of this is probably not new, but probably confirmed a lot of suspicions that people had about certain events that have happened in the past. Like one question that was asked by a member of Congress was about Google's acquisition of DoubleClick, and then later the merging of data from Google's other products with DoubleClick. That was probably one interesting thing that I heard. I think most people sort of knew most of those things anyway, but nonetheless, it was still quite interesting to hear that it was coming from people outside of the digital advertising and marketing industry, from politicians that were investigating this. So you could tell that the politicians, at least their staff members, had done quite a lot of research and spoken to a lot of industry experts to form these questions. So yeah, it was a pretty interesting hearing.
You know, that's exactly the takeaway that I'm taking from this new hearing. And I remember the very first hearing related to all these topics that happened back in the day when Mark Zuckerberg was brought to justice because of everything that happened with Facebook, and I believe it was with Cambridge Analytica, right? So because of that, I realized back in the day that in fact there was not really a broad understanding in politics about what these companies were doing. And I remember that back then questions were so superficial and were so basic. You know, I remember the typical question related to, so how does Facebook make money? And it's like, yeah, we all know how Facebook makes money. So it's that part of seeing how they have evolved from just making questions that many people know the answers to go into very detailed questions, as you said, like doing their research and getting more information from industry experts to really ask interesting questions, not just superficial ones. And my take on that as well is that things are becoming increasingly more complex for this type of companies. It seems like it is a common thing now to hear that they are on hearings and they have to be more present in scenarios in which they have to explain what they are doing with data. And in that sense, as we were talking before we started recording this session today, there's going to be another hearing, or that there has been another hearing like a couple of days ago as well. Am I right?
Yeah, that's right. There was another hearing, 3 days ago, I think it was, on the 14th of September, by a different US subcommittee, but still on the topic of antitrust. And this one was focused specifically on Google, I believe, and online advertising as well. I haven't watched that. Hearing yet, but I have read a couple of articles that have summarized some of the main points in it. Luckily, this hearing only goes for 3 hours, not 5 hours, so it's not as long as the previous one. But no doubt, I think that also is worth watching, because it's more, as I said, it's more focused on Google and also online advertising and the dominance that they have in the digital advertising and marketing industry.
Great. I'm looking forward to seeing if you come up with a shorter version of that. I will definitely have a look at it.
Definitely, I'll put my video editing skills to use one more time.
Okay, great.
So yeah.
So
Cool, excellent. So yeah, just continuing on with the walled garden topic, Johanna, I've actually got a question for you about again walled gardens. So what's your perception of walled gardens, and how do you think that they will shape the AdTech picture over the next few years?
So the way I see it, Mike, I believe that the AdTech picture is going to start being way more focused on a few players. When it comes to activating advertising, publishers are going to have way less possible options, because those that have the full capabilities are going to be just a few. And by just a few, I'm talking about Facebook, I'm talking about Google. So those big companies that we mentioned in the last video that are building those walled gardens are going to be the ones covering most of the market share. So the way I see it is just as an oligopoly, as a union of companies basically that have all the market share and that have all the market power as well. And that's actually not good for the industry, because as soon as you start getting into that, everything related to pricing, everything related to important decisions, everything related to data access becomes just a matter of decisions for those big companies that we were mentioning. And the rest of us are just left out of the picture and at the mercy of what those companies decide. So I expect, or my idea of how things are going to look is not very nice, really. It's a kind of biased or unbalanced, let's say. How about yourself?
Yeah, I definitely agree with a lot of the points you made there, particularly about companies being at the mercy of these walled gardens. And we've seen that a lot recently over the past few years with a lot of the changes that have been made to, web browsers, and more recently, the in-app mobile advertising industry with changes that Apple have proposed to iOS. So yeah, it is a very worrying topic, I think, for independent ad tech companies and MarTech companies out there, because any of the changes that these walled gardens make, whether it's Safari or Google or Apple, even as a company with not only Safari but also the iOS environments, any changes they make, to user privacy or any kind of restrictions they make to data access, is going to have a massive negative impact on a lot of different companies. So, as you said, and I think this is one of the reasons why all these there are these antitrust investigations, not only in the US but also in the past in Europe as well, that are looking into the dominance really of these companies, because, as you said, a lot of companies are at their mercy, and it can really destroy business models, and a lot of smaller companies can, shut up shop basically, because if there's no real way to get around this or to come up with any kind of decent alternatives, it can be very hard for companies to compete in these industries. So yeah, it'd be very interesting to see what happens over the next few years, because there are a lot of factors at play. We've mentioned the antitrust investigation. Who knows what's going to come of that? changes that are being made to browsers and privacy sandbox, and there's a lot of different things at play here. So and pretty much all of them involve the walled gardens in some way. So it'll be very interesting to see how all this pans out over the next few years, and what the digital advertising and marketing industries look like in 5 to 10 years. Because as you said, there is really no second alternative, to Google in many cases. It's like, as you said, if Google want to increase their prices by 2% or 5% or 10%, a lot of companies, can't say, okay, no problem, we're just going to use competitor B, because they have more or less the same scale, the same capabilities, the same products. There's not really too much direct competition, particularly in the digital advertising and marketing industries. When you think of that, I think it's like 70 or 80 cents of every dollar spent on digital advertising goes to either Facebook or Google. There's not too much direct competition in those senses. Of course, there are independent ad tech companies that compete with Google in the programmatic advertising space, like the Trade Desk and all these other independent ad tech companies.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as them being a clear alternative, it's not like Coke or Pepsi, right? If the price of Coke goes up 50%, people are going to say, okay, no, everyone's going to drink Pepsi because it's more or less the same thing.
Yes.
It works a little bit differently in digital advertising and marketing. So
that's a great analogy. So I don't know. I believe that these situations, I remember when I was studying economics, one of the things that kind of got tattooed in my mind is that oligopolies, monopolies don't tend to be good for the market, and this is one of those situations. So yes, it is what we have at the moment. Okay, now Mike, we are moving on to the final question. And the final question is going to be all around the blog posts that we put together. All those, the three blog posts that we launched recently, that we published. And I want to ask you, give me one reason why people should take the time to read those blog posts.
Mm-hmm. Well, I definitely think that we've done a pretty good job with all three of these blog posts to really highlight both the past, present, and future of attribution in AdTech, and obviously that's why we've named those blog posts in that way. But yeah, I think with a lot of these topics, they can be really difficult to understand. If you haven't worked in digital advertising or marketing for a long time, or even if you have, but your experience and knowledge is with one particular area, it can be really hard to understand what it all means, right? And there's a lot of, when we're talking about anything in ad tech these days, like whether it's the changes to Apple's IDFA or whether it's privacy sandbox, you really need to understand the context to understand what's happening in the present. So I think we've done a pretty good job of explaining that and covering a lot of different topics in these blog posts. So I'd say that's it, to try and understand these complex topics and the current situation. Definitely read our blog posts.
Great.
And what about you, Johanna? What would you say?
I would say, Mike, that I find that the context is super important. As you said, I feel also that we did a great job in that part, like covering where is it that we are coming from and how is it that we got to this point. But at the same time, it is very important to start looking at the future. I mean, we know what's happening now, and we know that third-party cookies are coming to an end. But we can either sit and cry. I'm pretty sure nobody's going to cry over this, but we can either just sit and watch the end of cookies coming and wait for many other people to do something while we just wait, or we can start actioning things within our company now. And that's one of the focuses that we have in the blog posts as well. We wanted to run through that past, present, and future, but with a focus on being able to know what we can do today to prepare for that new scenario. And basically we put some ideas together in that blog post, in the final blog post, so that you can know how you can start preparing and how you can make your company safe for a scenario in which third-party cookies are no longer available. And instead, and still, you know, that measurement is a possible thing without third-party cookies. And that's why I believe it is important, because we don't only look at the past, we also look at the future and how we can address that new situation. And that would be it from my side.
Perfect.
Great.
That sounds great.
Mike, I really have to tell you that I enjoyed so much having our calls and doing our blog posts together. It's been a very nourishing experience, and I hope people enjoy these videos as well, you who are watching. And that's it. I'll talk to you soon, Mike.
Cool. Sounds good. It's been a pleasure for me as well. It's really great to understand these topics from a different perspective, and you've had some really great points that you've brought up in the videos and contribute immensely to the articles. It's also been a pleasure for me as well.
Great. Thank you, Mike.
Cool. See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye.